Have you ever seen a scary headline like "Critical Vulnerability Found in Google Chrome, CVE-2025-12345 with a 9.8 CVSS score"? If you've ever wondered what that actually means, you're in the right place. Today, we're breaking down CVEs and CVSS scores, how vulnerabilities are named, how their severity is calculated, and how security teams use that information to prioritize threats. Let's get into it. CVE stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, and is basically a standardized way of naming and tracking vulnerability flaws across software and hardware. Think of it like a digital wanted poster for vulnerabilities. Each CVE is given a unique ID like CVE 2025-12345. That helps researchers, vendors, and security teams all refer to the same issue in a consistent way no matter what tools or platforms they're using. For example, if a critical vulnerability is found in a popular web application, that flaw gets assigned a CVE ID, and that ID shows up in patch notes, vulnerability scanners, threat intelligence feeds, and security bulletins, making it easier to track and respond to the issue across the entire cybersecurity ecosystem. CVE entries are maintained by the MITRE Corporation, a nonprofit organization funded by the US government, and the program itself is sponsored by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. Large organizations like Google or Microsoft are given blocks of CVE IDs to assign internally. So you might see something like CVE-2025-00001 from Google, or CVE-2025-10001 from Microsoft. Now, that doesn't mean there's actually 10,001 vulnerabilities. It just means that the ID comes from a block allocated to that vendor. There's also shared ranges available for researchers or projects that aren't backed by major vendors. It's important to note a CVE entry doesn't contain all the technical details or exploits. It's more like a summary and a reference point. It tells you that a vulnerability exists, assigns it a name, and often links to a more detailed write-up elsewhere. Now that we have a name for the vulnerability, the next question is, how dangerous is it? That's where CVSS comes in, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. CVSS is a framework used to measure how severe a vulnerability is. It gives each CVE a score between 0.0 to 10.0, with 10 being the most critical. This helps security teams prioritize which vulnerabilities need immediate attention and which ones might be less urgent. Think of it like the Richter scale for cyber threats. It doesn't just tell you something went wrong, it tells you how bad the impact could be. A CVSS score takes into account several factors like how the vulnerability is exploited. Does the attacker need physical access, or can they exploit it remotely over the internet? Does the attacker need to be authenticated? What kind of impact does it have if the vulnerability is exploited? Can it affect confidentiality, integrity, or availability? Or could it be exploited repeatedly or only once? All of these inputs feed into a formula that generates a score. Based on that score, vulnerabilities are typically categorized as low being 0.1 to 3.9, medium being 4.0 to 6.9, and high being 7.0 to 8.9, and finally critical being 9.0 to that perfect 10. So when you hear about a CVE with a CVSS score of 9.8, you might know right away that it's a serious issue and likely needs immediate attention. It's also important to remember a CVSS score doesn't account for your specific environment. Something rated as a 9.8 might not be exploitable in your organization, while a 5.0 might be a bigger deal if it affects a critical system or something that's internet facing. That's why CVSS is just one part of the equation when assessing risk. Over the years, the CVSS scoring system has evolved to become more accurate and useful. CVSS version 2 released back in 2007 and was focused more on exploitability and impact, but it didn't always reflect real-world risk accurately. CVSS version 3.0 released back in 2015 and introduced more granularity, like better scoring for privilege requirements and user interaction, helping organizations prioritize vulnerabilities more effectively. CVSS version 3.1 refined that even further with clearer definitions and more consistent scoring. We're now in CVSS version 4.0, which released in late 2023 and is making scoring even more flexible, adding concepts like threat metrics, vulnerability response efforts, and more contextual inputs to reflect how exploitable something really is. The takeaway here is the Common Vulnerability Scoring System continues to improve as the threat landscape evolves, and understanding the versions can help you interpret scores more accurately. So that's what CVEs and CVSS scores are, a standardized way to name and measure vulnerabilities so security teams can prioritize what matters. It's not perfect, but it gives us a common language for discussing risk, and that's a powerful tool in cybersecurity. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel or checking out one of the other videos on screen. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.